There's a couple other historical items I was going to get off on in terms of theory and stuff, but I have the urge to go after some low-hanging fruit commies. And what ends up happening is a lot of times I write scripts, maybe a new script probably every other day. But a lot of times by the time I get done with them, I don't like them and I just basically blow them off. And I wrote this about a week or two back when the New York mayoral candidate was starting to get hot. And I decided to revisit it because, I mean, even though it's an easy target, it's not going away. So, on the slim chance I come up with a new way of saying something that might make an impact on someone or give somebody a tool to use to explain it to someone else, maybe I'm doing some good. So, doing this from time to time is probably necessary. So, with with New York being on the precipice of electing a communist mayor, I thought I'd like to take a stab at debunking communism from what I think is a slightly different angle, the human angle. Historically, we have seen communism always fails, and socialism tends to impede the standard of living as a direct function of how much of it is implemented. As always, someone's going to throw out the not real communism or not real socialism argument. And there are literally dozens of degrees of socialism and nearly as many iterations of theories that have spawned from Marx. So these complaints are at best pedantic, but really a lot of it is kind of ignorant because they even do, a lot of people who claim to be Marxists or communists don't even know their own theory. Now, Marx's ideas are about as implementable as suggesting all humanity could transition to an underwater civilization. Now, it does look kind of plausible when you do a small community. In this case, maybe like a hippie commune. But the more people try to enter it, the worse it flounders. Now, the problem really starts with Marx. He really wasn't a good human being. He didn't understand the world around him. Marx was born into a wealthy family and then spent the rest of his life, except for a brief period, unemployed and poor. If not for loans and donations from friends and followers, he would have been absolutely destitute. He spent his entire life struggling to feed his family. One of his children died young and he lacked the means to bury them, leaving the body to decompose in the house until an acquaintance paid to have her removed and interred. His life experience revolved around heavy drinking, arguing philosophy, and looking for handouts. His partner Engels had to hound him to write. He failed to actually write the second and third volumes of Das Kapital, which Engels had to write himself from Marx's notes. So we have a man who never ran a business, never really worked, never put in hard labor, trying to create an economic system that's supposed to take care of everyone so that they would never want. It was, in fact, a fantasy conception to save him from a world he didn't understand and couldn't succeed in. Well, he couldn't manage property. Well, make a system where the property belongs to everyone. Can't make money because you're lazy? Well, make money disappear in your fairy tale utopia. If you can't fix what you don't grasp, it's just better to make it go away. Now, some people will say, "Well, wait a minute. There's no property or money in part. That's just a main thing in socialism. You can't have property or money." Well, that's not true. Actually, earlier forms of theoretical socialism had both property and money. Earlier forms of socialism were actually trying to figure out how to fairly resolve the problem in pre revolutionary France, where 55% of the property was held by the government, nobles, and the church. Marx's ideas began to unravel even before his death. His predictions of the conditions that would lead to revolution were all trending the wrong way. This is why so many splinter groups formed. Each of them was trying to find a way to make socialism work because Marx was so wrong in his predictions that other people had to make up new transitional events in order for the idea to stay alive. And for this video, I will be using socialism and Marxism interchangeably because until World War II, everybody else did. Now, the biggest shift from Marxism to Leninism is likely the idea of the vanguard party. This is a point where purist Marxists will say, well, Leninism isn't real socialism, or it's not real communism. Well, we already talked about that. It's just a different iteration. Somebody else trying to make it work because the original idea had already failed prior to implementation. So, from a pure human behavior viewpoint, Lenin's kind of right and Marx is wrong. Marx's idea was that in the early stage of the revolution, the whole of the workers would decide how to redistribute the property. So it's hard enough to get a plebiscite to function succinctly on a worded question. But getting all the people to figure out how to word the question they are going to be voting on would be absolutely unworkable without some kind of hierarchy. So, does that mean I support Lenin's vanguard party concept? Well, no, not the way Lenin implemented it. Problem comes down to how communists view expertise and who is initially attracted to communism. I'll backtrack a little bit on this whole vanguard idea once I explain the idea of who is attracted to communism first. Notice that in our world, people who want communism are always looking to take something from somebody else and not actually better themselves. For example, many communists want free health care. Have you ever heard any of them say, well, I want communism to occur because I want to be a doctor? I haven't. There's an interesting disconnect there if you choose to see it. You don't ever hear them saying, the free market prevents me from being a doctor. If only communism came, I could be a better person, become a doctor, and serve my fellow man. None of them want to be a doctor because, first, they know the work is too hard, and second, they're too lazy and stupid for even communism to allow them to become one. They want the fruits of other people's labor. Now, the vanguard party aspect will fail because there will never be the expertise concentrated in the group to make the transition. Communism supporters are full of people who want free stuff at other people's expense, or they want to be given leadership or management positions that no merit-based system would ever give them. So the vanguard concept draws from a bunch of people who want to rule but lack the ability. They can't organize the revolution. In Lenin's case, the vanguard party was a bunch of ne'er-do-wells who were partying on the remains of their family's money as exiles across Europe. One very common thread we see across Marx, Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot is a universal disdain for expertise and specialization. To them, the factory owners and upper-level managers don't seem like they contribute to a product being made. A large landholder appears to be someone who could be replaced by a committee of his farmhands. These are the conclusions of people who have never worked close enough to production to understand ultimately how things are built or created. The flip side of this is that some of the same competent managers and owners who are there making things work before the revolution end up fleeing or fighting when given the decision to give up their production to a committee. The end result is people who have no clue what they're doing trying to make things work. It's why major shifts in communist policy cause massive shortfalls and starvation, assuming starvation wasn't actually built into the plan. The Great Leap Forward in China shows this perfectly. People who knew nothing about steel production demanded 11 million tons of steel. Lacking the facilities to make that steel, they demanded the peasantry provide this steel. The peasants built backyard furnaces incapable of producing quality steel. Some 10.7 million tons were produced, and 3 million of it were unusable. There was a side effect just from this alone of mass starvation. Workers were producing steel instead of food. Workers were melting down agricultural implements to turn them into other things, primarily ingots. The transport system was clogged with iron when people were desperately needing food. Meanwhile, at the exact same time, they implemented agricultural ideas en masse, basically across the entire country, that were purely theoretical. Essentially, some communist scientists came up with some ideas that had never been proved, and rather than testing them out, they decided to do it nationwide. One of these ideas was called dense seeding. Uh, there's some videos out there on that. You can check it out. Deep planting and concentrating fertilizer on good land and abandoning the marginal land. Uh, this ended up creating a famine that killed more people than anything we know of in history. The only people who would make such orders are people who had no functional knowledge of metallurgy or agriculture. Now, oddly, some other socialists, like the fascists, use something called syndicalism because they recognize the flaws in Marx and Lenin. Syndicalism created boards with unions, managers, and government as a method to co opt and control expertise rather than drive it out or kill it. Now, it didn't work a whole lot better, but no one starved to death in Mussolini's Italy. The refusal to acknowledge that expertise goes right back to Marx. Because the idea of money eluded him, he failed to consider or even talk to somebody who might know better that money at that time and now is the only known way to have price discovery. Prices tell you what demand is. It tells you to make more or less of something. The Soviets actually briefly tried to eradicate money. They quickly realized that this was destroying whatever little economy they had and that money had to be part of the exchange. So they brought back rules and basically set prices instead. In the absence of price discovery, central planners make guesses that, for the most part, caused endless shortages of everything. Even if the person at the top demands a certain amount of steel, lack of price discovery won't allow one to see the dozens, if not hundreds, of inputs and variables required to make steel. If Marx were intelligent, he could have recognized the critical features of money and come up with a theoretical concept that eliminated undesirable aspects while keeping or improving the critical ones. However, being a bit of a moron, he decided to just get rid of money altogether due to lack of comprehension. Could something replace price discovery? It's possible that some kind of futuristic super AI could balance raw materials production and fulfill a lot of the needs people have. However, it doesn't fix this idea of scarcity, nor can it assess priority beyond basic needs. Imagine that by some miracle, AI popped up in the early 60s, and it's happening in these big room sized computers of the time. Now, assume a socialistic society turned decisions over to that AI. A system like that might do a decent job putting people in shelter and providing with sufficient food calories. But we don't need personal computers, cell phones, or the internet. We don't need lightweight recreational camping equipment, jet skis, or state of the art athletic footwear. In all likelihood, AI would never be able to produce anything like that because it wouldn't be obvious that you needed to go beyond basic stuff. So that brings us to the obvious question. Could smart people make communism work? The answer there is maybe. We do have a wealthy socialist class in the US. Wealth on its own does not indicate a general expertise. The owner of such wealth may have a very narrow expertise. Their primary expertise might be only in managing wealth. Then we have to look at the issue of motive. If a wealthy person is inclined to implement communism, they may not be doing it altruistically. They may not care what happens to the proles if their goal is a system that gives them more wealth or power. But ultimately, this question of could smart people make communism work becomes itself a paradox. The people who are the most capable of potentially implementing communism and making it work at a level of efficiency never previously seen are the people who would never try to do it in the first place. Okay, hope that provides you a little bit of food for thought. And if you're a communist, yeah, go ahead. I may not answer you. I don't know. The arguments get tiresome. But if you throw me something that's interesting and I haven't seen before, I'll definitely talk about it. Uh, please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithm's brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, look at my other titles. I get into lots of stuff. You'll find something you like, you should subscribe. And if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.